Hi, so this is a video where I'm gonna talk a little bit about alignment, cohesion, coherence, a little bit of a mindset vibe for this one. If you've been around here before, or you're just poking around, I make music. This is mostly a music channel, but every once in a while I'll do a little mindset stuff. I would consider myself someone who has worked quite hard and even diligently on my mindset in this life of ours. I've had many a breakthrough, and I've even documented them. I look forward to sharing more snippets of just all the, I guess they're lessons, level ups, adjustments, calibrations that I've experienced throughout the years, throughout my 20s. But I think maybe among one of the most resonant mindset shifts and states that I've encountered and experienced is really alignment. It's a really interesting concept. It's the kind of thing where it transcends hard work, hustle culture. It transcends luck. It might even create luck. In a sense, what it has been for me, and what I suspect it might be for you, is it boils down to focus. It's like, I feel like there are times in our lives, and indulge me in these late night musings, if you will, but I feel like there's times in our lives where, things are a little bit out of focus, things are blurry. I literally had one of my contacts fall, that's why I'm wearing glasses, one of my contacts fell off today while I was on my computer, and I was reminded by just how drastically different my experience is when I can see clearly. And to me, that relates to alignment in a sense, because to me, alignment is when you bring your life into focus, and it's a focus that happens when your thoughts, feelings, words, and actions all point in the same direction. And it's a very interesting place to be psychologically, maybe even spiritually to some extent, because it's not perfection, it's not the end state, but you feel like there's less internal dissonance, there's less strife, and there's just less a war. There's less war in your life, and there's more kind of a balance and direction and directionality, if you will, with your path. And a big thing that changed for me was just discovering my path. I mean, since I was 15, 16 years old, I fell in love with music production, and then that grew into rapping and singing, and songwriting was a part of that at some point, and that even expanded into writing, and so to a large extent, I've always had music as kind of a core part of my life, and it also came with a lot of ambition. If you're someone who knows me or is close to me, you'll know that I really aim to really do this music thing, and not just be, relatively successful, or really do the thing and get it done and reach kind of the highest levels in the music industry. And I know that might sound a lot, especially if you kind of look at where I am now, but that's also the beauty of alignment, which is that because you are so kind of in tune with what you want, who you are, you know, and what you stand for. You've got values, you've got backbone, and you've got a vision. And where alignment comes in relative to vision, I feel like, is that vision is great. Vision is essential, especially if you want to do kind of, you know, more of the interesting things in life. But if you have a vision and you're not aligned, you know, that can lead to, you know, not having both feet on the ground, not taking action, being a little too pie in the sky. But if your vision and alignment mixed with some commitment, this is another beat I made. It's called Redemption. I think I started writing lyrics to this. Yeah, if you have vision but no alignment, you know, you could be the type of person who's like, oh yeah, you know, I really want to get in shape, but then you don't eat particularly well and you don't work out often enough. And, you know, so there's that lack of alignment. But if you're someone who's like, I really want to get in shape, so you make that decision, you start eating better, you start hitting it hard, you know, with your workouts, or at least not necessarily hard, but consistently, or you're showing up for yourself, like, that's when things start to change. And then that also leads us to the topic of momentum. And thank you for sticking with me if you're still watching. I know this is kind of not my usual video, and I'm usually in here writing something or rapping over something or talking about, you know, some girl who's on my mind and my music, you know, but it's good to just check in every once in a while and just kind of talk about my thoughts, I guess, on like kind of both where I am, where I've been, where I'm going. And anyway, so in terms of vision plus alignment, it's like when you're aligned, you're matching, you know. I'm into style as well. You could even think about it as like, when you're aligned, the outfit works, you know. It's not too matchy, so you're like, so you look corny, and like you look like, and I guess the equivalent of that would be like, if you're trying to overly optimize everything in your life and you want every single thing to be connected to your main mission, I think there's value in side quests. There's value. That's a bit of a stretch, granted, but you know, there's something to be said for over optimizing and over indexing on, you know, your mission. You know, there's still things I enjoy outside of the music dream and outside of writing, you know, soccer, women's soccer, cooking, you know, all these kind of hobbies, reading, listening to other people's music. So, you know, I'm starting to run out of time here, but I guess I'd leave you with this. If you feel like you're someone who's not currently aligned in life, who maybe says one thing and does another, or believes something but doesn't seem to act in accordance with that belief, I would just say be love. Stay, you know, be love and live true, you know. And I would say, you know, if you're fighting something, you know, sometimes you got to win the fight before you can get into that full alignment. So if you're still in the trenches, you know, I think to a large extent you create your reality. And if you choose not to lose, then you don't lose. So keep fighting. And if you're still fighting, if you've kept fighting and you still haven't won, then continue to fight. And you know, if you're someone who maybe doesn't feel like they're fighting or in survival mode, but feels like they're not aligned, just look at your thoughts. That's a good place to start. You know, look at what you're thinking and try to clean that up a little bit. Don't be afraid to argue with yourself in your mind a little bit, within reason, and not out loud in public so people think you're unhinged. But, you know, push back a little bit if you've got that pathological critic who's telling you your dreams aren't real or it's not realistic or anything. Push back a little bit and start to get to the point where you see things as accurately as you can, with that level of optimism. This is another beat I made called Graveyard Killer. I was in a phase when I made this one. No, it still holds up though. But anyway, yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for watching, and stay aligned.